Look at the tertiary sector, which of course expanded by 0.4%, but there were movements sideways. Let us start with trade, up 0.5%, which was largely in retail trade, motor trade, accommodation and food and beverages that went up. In transport, up 2.4%. It was largely due to land transport, air transport, and of course, transport support services that went up or registered increases. Let us look at finance. It went up due to insurance and pension funding, as well as auxiliary activities that showed a stronger activity in the quarter. Let us look at government. Government went down 0.2%. Of course, there were lower employment in the provincial government. Now, personal services down 0.3%. We saw a decline driven by health and education. Let us look at nominal GDP. It was estimated to be sitting at 1.802 trillion in the first quarter of 2025. Where are the biggest movements? The movers were agriculture. It went up by 29 billion straight to 56 billion. Electricity went up by 4 billion to 60 billion. Mining went down by 30 billion to 95 billion. Manufacturing went down by 31 billion to 215 billion. And all of them returned a down of 98 billion compared to the previous quarter in the nominal GDP that we are reporting of 1.802 trillion. Let us look at the structure of our economy in the first quarter 2025. 24% as usual finance, personal services 17%, 14% trade, 13% manufacturing, government is sitting at 9%, transport at 7%, mining 6%, utilities 4%, agriculture 3%, and 2% construction. We know that agriculture is usually sitting between 2 and 3%, but we know that it's volatile, so it can shift at any given moment. In one interview, I was talking about the economy just before I walked in here. I could not refer to these numbers because they were not yet released. So I was talking to personal services sitting at 18% and manufacturing sitting at 14% due to rounding off. And of course, I knew the numbers, but I could not talk about them until we release them here. That's how we hold ourselves to strict measurement in relation to the work that we do. Now, let us look at expenditure on GDP. Expenditure on GDP in the first quarter of 2025 expanded by 0.1%, and indeed year on year sitting at 0.4%. Let us look at the revisions that we did. Last quarter we said that expenditure on GDP was sitting at 0.6%. It is now sitting at 0.5% as revised. Those that went up, one, are investments, as in gross fixed capital formations, as well as household final consumption expenditure. Those that stayed the same are exports of goods and services, government final consumption expenditure, and of course, the one that went down is imports of goods and services, and indeed returning a revised growth of 0.5% in the last quarter of 2024. Let us look at movements. Largely, if we look right at the bottom, particularly in the last 1 year, we are saying that quarter 1 2024 we went up at 0%, we stayed flat. Quarter 2 0.4%, quarter 3 we went in the negative 0.3%, quarter four 0.5% as revised, and indeed this quarter, the first quarter of 2021, expenditure on GDP is sitting at 0.1%. When we look at where we were in the last quarter, we can see that exports and household expenditure have remained in the positive from the previous quarter. Of course, where we see movements, we're talking about imports that went up by 2%. And indeed, the others in the form of government as well as investments have remained the same in the direction they took from the previous quarter, that is growing in the negative. Now, let us look at the contribution of imports, for example. We are saying that imports contributed 0.3 of a percentage point, in as much as exports contributing 0.3 of a percentage point, while their growth was different. Imports grew at 0.4%, exports at 1%. And indeed, we can see that, let me correct, not imports and exports. Let us go back to this slide and read it properly. We are saying that household expenditure as well as exports contributed 0.3 of a percentage point and grew at 0.4% as well as 1% respectively. Whereas imports in this regard contributed in the negative and grew at 2%. And indeed, we can see that government consumption as well as gross fixed capital formations contributed in the negative and grew in the negative, with the strongest contribution in the negative coming from investments as in gross fixed capital formations. Household expenditure. We are saying that over time, particularly in the last 1 year, we have seen it growing from the first quarter of 2024 flat. It went up 1.2%, 0.4%, and in the last quarter of 2024, 1.1%, and in this quarter that we are talking about, 0.4%. And the movements were largely contributed by transport, which contributed 0.2 of a percentage point and growing at 1.1%, followed by restaurant and hotels, as well as miscellaneous goods and services, and food and non-alcoholic beverages that contributed 0.1 of a percentage point each, while growing 1 at restaurant and hotels at 1.4%, health at 0.8%, and of course 0.6% for miscellaneous goods and services, and all the way to food and non-alcoholic beverages growing at 0.5%. But of course, those that went in the negative are recreation and culture, a slump of 0.6%, and indeed construction, a contraction of 0.1%. We can talk about what we have seen in the fourth quarter of 2024, comparing it with what we are seeing now in the first quarter. Transport particularly had gone into the negative in the fourth quarter 2024, contributing negative 0.1 of a percentage point. But now it has gone up to contribute much stronger, sitting at 0.2 of a percentage point and growing in the positive. And of course, we can see restaurants had gone in the negative in the fourth quarter 2024, and now they contributed 0.1 of a percentage point, having grown at 1.4%. Let us look at durability in terms of the categories. We are saying that all of them at household level went one. The biggest contribution came from services, 0.3 of a percentage point, followed by durable goods as well as non-durable goods at 0.1 of a percentage point each, while they grew at 0.8% and 0.3% respectively. And of course, semi-durable goods stayed flat and contributed 0%. Now, we can see the movements. All of them in the fourth quarter had contributed positively, and of course, they returned the same, albeit that their growths have actually become smaller compared to the previous quarter. Government, it went on a slump, 0.1%, and over time, we can see that the last time we saw government growing in the last year was during the second quarter of 2024 with 0.7%. Otherwise, it has gone in the negative. Third quarter, that is negative 1%, negative 0.8% in the fourth quarter, and indeed in this quarter, returning a slump of 0.1%. Let us look at investments. Investments, as we will remember, have been under pressure for quite some time. Because if we will remember very well, I think the two learned colleagues here, will remind me that they may have grown in the positive in the third quarter of 2024, but otherwise over a period of time, they were in the negative and currently returning a slump of 1.7%. So let us look all the way from the third quarter of 2023. Investments have been growing in the negative. They've been contracting. The only positive growth was 0.2% that we have seen in the third quarter of 2024. Otherwise, after that, we went in the negative, 0.5%, fourth quarter 2024, and indeed first quarter 2025 as of now, going in the negative 1.7%. And now, when we look at comparisons of what happened there, we are saying that residential buildings were the largest drag on the overall growth. As we can see that residential buildings put a contribution of negative 0.6 of a percentage point with a growth of negative 5.8%. And of course, we can see also machines and other equipment contribution negative 0.6% with a growth of negative 1.4%. And we can see construction works and transport equipment went on a slump.
All right, so we've been listening there to the statistician general Lesenga Maluleke, who has been breaking down the latest GDP numbers, and you can see on your screen there the breaking news is that the country's economy has grown by 0.1%, or at least 0.1 of a percentage point in the first quarter of the year. Still a far cry, of course, from the type of growth that we're hoping for in order to start eating into the country's staggering unemployment figures. We'll continue listening into that breakdown.